I rise this morning to address a situation that is very hard for me to believe, and I'm sure many of my colleagues, and maybe yourself also. It makes no sense to the people of our great state of West Virginia. And for nearly 2 weeks, hundreds of thousands of West Virginians have been deprived of basic necessities like water and electricity because of massive storms, not just West Virginia, but up and down the East Coast. At the peak of the outage, FEMA estimates that 688,000 West Virginians didn't have power. Now, that's a third of our state. 1/3 of our state was completely knocked out. And hundreds of thousands of people had to throw away all of their food in the refrigerator and the freezers because of the lack of electricity. Our National Guard and first responders did a superb job of keeping people safe. But this country learned just how vulnerable and inadequate our infrastructure is and how much we really have come to depend on it. Up and down the East Coast, our electrical grid was crippled by this storm because there is no backup plan, none whatsoever, that would keep the vital necessities of life running during these horrific storms. The fact is, we have to invest in our nation's infrastructure. We all talk about it, but still very little is being done. Power outages cost this country between $79 and $164 billion every year. That's because on top of powering our hospitals, our nursing homes, and our schools, reliable energy underpins our economy and keeps Americans at work. I know there are other needs around the world, but seeing firsthand how vulnerable our system is, I was so surprised, and you might be also, Madam President. I was disappointed, too, to hear yesterday that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is making a massive investment in power infrastructure in another country by awarding a $94 million contract to provide reliable power in Afghanistan. So I thought, how could I explain this back home? We're providing reliable power to the Afghans when nearly 200,000 West Virginians spent an entire week without electricity. We lost all of our food, suffered through nearly 100 degrees heat during this period of time, when our country is losing tens and hundreds of billions of dollars because of power outages all over the East Coast. As of 6 p.m. yesterday, this is more than 12 days after the storm, we still have over 30,000 people without electricity. Madam President, I cannot count the number of times I've come to this floor in the Senate chamber to say it is time to start rebuilding America and not Afghanistan. But in all my time in the Senate, I have not seen a starker example of misplaced priorities. It is wrong to invest in reliable power for the Afghan people when tens of thousands of not just West Virginians, but Americans all over this country have been without power for nearly 2 weeks because our infrastructure is so vulnerable. In fact, in our state, too many people still don't have reliable water. When power goes out, the water systems can't purify the water. In McDowell County, in our southern coal fields, FEMA expects that it will be another 2 to 3 weeks before the water service is restored to the customers in the Norfolk Public Service District. Let me repeat that, another 2 to 3 weeks without water, the basic necessity of life. That will be a full month after the storm without one of life's basic necessities. Something is truly out of balance. It's been almost 2 weeks since a storm of unprecedented strength hit our state. How can I look the people of my great state of West Virginia in the eye when our infrastructure is so poor that they don't have reliable power or water, but still tell them that we're investing in transmission lines to provide reliable power to Afghanistan? It just doesn't make sense. According to the Congressional Research Service, American taxpayers have already spent more than $89 billion on infrastructure projects in Afghanistan, including the cost of reconstruction assistance, diplomatic security, and activities by non-Department of Defense agencies. This is in addition to the $551 billion that we have spent on military operations. And that doesn't even begin to address Iraq, where we've spent at least $5 billion on electrical systems and $61 billion on infrastructure projects, according to the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction. And still, when you take a closer look at the project that was announced yesterday, the facts are even more disturbing. The Army Times reported that the Corps' awarding of $93.6 million to improve electrical transmission from the Kajaki Dam Power Station throughout the Helmand Province of Afghanistan to include burying transmission lines. Burying transmission lines, which we don't even do in America. And providing backup generators, which we don't have, which is why we've lost our water systems and our food. But believe it or not, the people of the United States, we already paid to build the Kajaki Dam powerhouse in the 70s. And I'm going to quote from this article from the Army Times. Because the entire electrical system has largely been neglected. Due to decades of war, Afghan and U.S. agencies are partnering to increase power generation and distribution to solve the severe lack of electricity in the region. Trust me, in West Virginia, we can understand the severe lack of power. This facility wasn't maintained in the 70s. It wasn't maintained in the 80s. It wasn't maintained in the 90s, and it's still not being maintained. And what makes us think that it'll be maintained now that we're spending millions and millions of dollars? And this is only one small piece of an even more costly contract to bring electricity to southern Afghanistan. The $93.6 million contract is the first of 6 integrated components collectively called the Kandahar-Helmand Power Project, a USAID initiative to expand the electrical distribution system of 2 provinces in southern Afghanistan with a combined estimated population of 1.7 million. Now, that's short of the population of my home state of West Virginia. We're about 1.8 million. It's one thing to help another country with loans, which I'm all for, that will help them get back on their feet so that they can repay their debts. But it's another thing entirely to pour billions of taxpayers' dollars into another country for a decade with no chance of any repayment to this country and to the taxpayers of the United States of America. Something is wrong with that. I can't say it enough. If you build a bridge in West Virginia, we won't blow it up. If you help us build a school, we won't burn it down. We're very appreciative. We appreciate the help of all the American taxpayers because we're part of this great country. And if you help us invest in a more reliable electricity system, we will use that power to make this country stronger, to power this nation's economy, and to provide good-paying jobs all over this country. Not only that, the scope of the problem with electricity infrastructure in West Virginia is tremendous. According to the National Energy Technology Laboratory, power outages in West Virginia take 4 times longer to fix than the national average. We've been blessed with so much beauty, but we have a kind of a challenging topography, if you will, and it makes it much more difficult. If we modernize our grid to make it more flexible and reliable, we can make a return on investment of up to $6 for every dollar that we invest. According to the studies from both the Electric Power Research Institute and the National Energy Technology Laboratory, instead of investing that money in Afghanistan, doesn't it just make sense to invest it here at home? And we'll start right in West Virginia if you like. Madam President, I would feel the same if this was in your state, if it was in any other state in the country. This might have been a once-in-a-lifetime storm, one where millions of people lost power no matter how well we prepared. But the fact that tens of thousands of West Virginians are still without power and water is a sign that we must do better as a country. This could have happened to any state, whether it's a storm, an earthquake, tornadoes, fires, floods, or a hurricane. And I would hope that my colleagues in the Senate would share my feelings. We can't help others if we don't make ourselves strong and don't keep ourselves strong. And we're beginning to neglect our very real needs here at home. As West Virginians, I'm proud to say that we're strong people. We're able to pick ourselves up faster than most, and we go to the aid of our friends and neighbors who need it most, even though they're in need themselves. But when you go to a filling station and the sign says, cash only, then you find out that the banks are closed because all the power's down, the ATM's out. We're changing and transforming our whole monetary system, but there's no backup plan. What do? We have a problem. We truly have a problem, but I know we can fix it because we're Americans. That's why it's time to rebuild America and our infrastructure, not Afghanistan or other places of the world. Let's make ourselves strong again so that we really can help people.